hello, and good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're located and joining us from today. Thank you all so much for connecting with us and joining us for Pay Rates Matter 2025 Salary Insights with Adecco. Today, we're diving into insights from Adecco's 2025 Salary Guide. We'll explore current trends in the labor market, key wage drivers, and smart strategies for employers navigating today's evolving pay landscape. I'm Ashley Weaver, and I'm thrilled to be your host for this LinkedIn Live event. Currently, I'm the director of our strategic sales support team that supports our RFPs, sales presentations, and marketing content with more than 7 years tenure here at Adecco. I'm joined by three of my brilliant colleagues. First and foremost, Nikki Howard, Director of Research and Business Reviews, who specializes in labor and economic trends and has been with Adecco for 7 years. Next, Andrew Johns, Senior Director of Customer Insights and Analytics, who specializes in internal data analytics and has been with Adecco for 11 years. And last but not least, Jimmy Caparimo, Managing Director of National Account Sales, who specializes in strategic solution-based sales and has been with Adecco for 22 years. So with this cast of characters and experts, we're able to bring you a holistic view of what is occurring in the labor market. A quick reminder, we'll have time for questions and answers at the end. So please drop your questions in the chat as we move along. We'll answer as many as we can. So with that, welcome. And Nikki, can you set the stage for us with what you're seeing across the labor market?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Ashley. So I think it's important that we just start with the fundamental truth. Pay rates matter. In fact, this was very evident in our 2024 associate survey, and it found that 53% of respondents listed pay as their number one factor when they considered a new job. That was more than flexibility, more than benefits, even more than location. And oh, Ashley, hot off the press, I just got our results from the 2025 associate survey, and that's going to be coming out in a few weeks. And guess what? Pay is again the number one factor, with 50% of respondents saying that it was the most important thing that they considered.
Okay, hot off the press, a nice little surprise for a Wednesday. Repeat that again for us, Nikki.
Yeah, absolutely. So pay is so essential, and 50% of our respondents said that it was the most important thing that they considered when they were looking for a new job.
Look at that. We're literally, a minute and 34 seconds into the live stream, and you're already blowing our minds with data. So to reiterate for a third time, in 2024, 53% of respondents, and then this year, 50% of respondents said that pay rate is the number one factor they consider when choosing a temporary job. So with that, Nikki, can you tell us why pay has jumped and then remained at the top for job seekers?
Yeah, so, Ashley, for many workers, especially hourly, frontline, temporary roles, pay directly impacts their ability to meet their basic needs. Inflation continues to drive up the essential costs of groceries, housing, transportation. And as a result, pay is just no longer a preference. It's a non-negotiable. It's a deciding factor whether someone takes a job, stays in their role, or, even applies in the first place. And, to answer your question, over the past few years, we've really seen a consistent, sometimes dramatic wage growth. During the pandemic and throughout the recovery, the demand for workers just far outpaced supply, especially in sectors like healthcare, manufacturing, logistics, customer service. And to attract talent, employers had to raise their wages very rapidly. If you look back to 2022, the BLS was consistently reporting average hourly earnings rising 5 to 6% in their monthly jobs report. Now that pace has cooled, but it hasn't reversed, and we're still seeing that upward momentum. In fact, average hourly earnings increased 3.9% in May, which was higher than expected. When we look at light cash job posting data, That shows that the median advertised wage has risen 6% year over year. So, these aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They really reflect a broader reset in what workers think about pay. And, actually, it's really important to understand is that these wage increases, they didn't fill short-term gaps in the economy. They really reset expectations. For example, when employees started making 18 or $20 an hour for warehouse or customer service roles, those wages became very sticky. And now they're not willing to settle for less. That level of pay is now standard. In fact, the median advertised wage for customer service and warehouse roles in the US is $19 to $20 an hour. And one of the really important things that, is important to understand is that workers are just more informed than ever, between online reviews, pay transparency laws, social media. They have access to real-time benchmarks, so they know what competitors are offering. They know when a job is underpaying. And in a market where the supply of labor is still very, very tight, especially for skilled or semi-skilled roles, employers who try to roll back pay are really going to struggle both with hiring and retention.
So, Nikki, I just want to jump in real quick and start with that. I'm over here taking notes because, I don't dilly dally in the data all the time, but we all directly, impact from this. So a few things that you said, they reset expectations, wages became sticky, and workers are more informed now than ever. So with that, you're saying employers can't afford to go back to pre-pandemic rates, right?
No, they absolutely cannot go back to pre-pandemic rates. Workers now expect higher pay as the norm, and it's not the exception. And the expectations, is it's not just based on their last salary. They're really being shaped and reinforced by national wage trends, especially when you have things like union agreements that really capture public attention. Take the auto industry, for example. The UAW's recent contract secured a 25% wage increase for many of their workers over the life of that agreement. And some of them are going to be receiving even higher boosts than that. Then we had UPS, where the Teamsters negotiated a deal that raised top driver pay to $49 an hour by the end of that contract. So these are massive headline grabbing wins that were, widely covered in the news, and not just by industry insiders, but by the mainstream media. And it set a very visible benchmark. And, it's not just these big national contracts. We're seeing regional agreements and local strikes that push up wages too. If you think about healthcare workers on the West Coast or hospitality workers in some of these major metro areas, think of Starbucks. Even employers without unions are feeling the ripple effect. And why is this? Because workers see these raises and they begin to expect similar compensation in their own roles, especially if they work in similar environments. Yeah. It really raises the psychological floor of what's considered an acceptable wage. So, it's not just about keeping pace with competitors in your market. It's really now about meeting worker expectations, that are being shaped nationally. And the companies that understand this, and really respond proactively, they're going to be much better positioned to build a stable, committed workforce than those that don't. And the ones that don't, they're going to struggle to really attract and retain, even hourly talent.
Yeah, and to your point, Nikki, we see a lot of this stuff in the media, in the news, mainstream stuff, national coverage. And from my vantage point, that's a major shift, right? So we see the impact, but would you say that it's impacting all industries the same way? Is it different? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the pressure is, especially intense in sectors where demand just consistently outpaces supply. So again, industries like manufacturing, healthcare, logistics, even retail support.
Mm-hmm.
In these areas, the number of job openings just outstrip the number of available qualified workers, and it has for years. And despite some of the headlines that we're seeing about economic uncertainty, many of these employers in these sectors, they're still struggling to fill all of their roles. And
Mm-hmm.
it's this supply demand imbalance that really forces companies to compete more aggressively and not compete, just through their job ads or, better benefits, but through wages. When talent is scarce, pay becomes a key differentiator. And, because the talent pool is so limited, offering a competitive wage isn't just a recruitment tool. It's really a survival strategy.
Wow. Again, you're dropping all kind of nuggets. I'm gonna repeat that too. Offering a competitive wage isn't just a recruitment tool, it's a survival strategy. So, with that, Nikki, what are some ways you're seeing companies adjust to this new wage normal, right? How are they doing this to develop their survival strategy?
Yeah, so we're really seeing some employers implement cost of living adjustments into their base pay.
Mm-hmm.
And even for hourly and temporary roles, just to stay in the game. These adjustments were really once reserved for salary, union, kind of corporate positions, but in high inflation markets, they're really kind of becoming the norm, even for entry level and frontline jobs. So it's really no longer unusual to see warehouse or production roles that are offering increases, tied to inflation trends.
Hmm.
Another way companies are adjusting to this new wage normal, they're moving towards skill-based compensation and really kind of moving away from that traditional model that rewards tenure alone. Instead, they're focusing on what employees can actually do. For example, a production worker who's cross-trained on multiple machines or has a forklift certification. They may earn significantly more than someone who's been at the company longer, but has fewer practical skills. And this trend just really reflects a broader recognition, I think, that impact and versatility, it really matters more than how long someone's held their job title. And employers are just now placing a premium on adaptability,
Mm-hmm.
certifications, new technical skill sets. And this evolution of pay, philosophy really opens the door to internal mobility, through upskilling investments. Companies that are, reward skill acquisition, they're really signaling to their workers that, there's a path forward and that
Mm-hmm.
learning new things will be, financially recognized. And that's a major advantage, in retaining motivated talent, especially when you're thinking about, younger workers who are looking for growth and progression within their careers.
Yeah, I love all of that. And I think that all makes perfect sense, right? It's about paying for impact, not just experience.
Mhm.
And I love what you shared about, impact and versatility matter more, skills-based compensation, internal mobility, and upskilling. And I think it's worthwhile, while we're all here to also mention how Adecco, through our partnership with the nonprofit, the Adecco Group US Foundation, allows associates access to online and hands-on upskilling programs at no cost. And Nikki, you've helped, support presentations, et cetera, with this about how we've also partnered with clients to develop custom upskilling and training programs to help talent do just that, right? Develop more skills in this rapidly changing world of work.
Yeah, absolutely. And the kind of investment in upskilling is just so crucial right now. And as more companies shift towards this skills-based pay model, employees who gain new certifications or develop those cross-functional skills, they can
Mhm.
significantly increase their earning potential. And it's really initiatives like the ones through the Adecco Group US Foundation, that are just they're not just beneficial for workers, they're really strategic tools for employers. And that really kind of brings us to what else we're seeing in the market, and that's a shift away from location-based pay models. With the rise of remote and hybrid roles,
Mhm.
expansion of pay transparency laws, companies are they're being held to a higher standard when it comes to wage equity. And, as I mentioned before, workers have more visibility, and they can see what others are earning, and they expect fairness, regardless of where they live, and as a result, national pay ranges are, they're tightening, and it's getting harder for employers to, really justify lower wages just based on regional differences.
Yeah, yeah. And Nikki, if I may, before you go any further, can you talk about the connection between pay and retention and then the impact on business, right? We know turnover is always top of mind for a lot of our clients.
It's top of mind for a lot of our clients, yes. So, actually, when companies fall behind market expectations, whether that's on pay, transparency, growth opportunities, the consequences are very real. Job postings, they tend to stay open longer, and that slows down production and increases costs. Overtime becomes more frequent, and that puts in a, even higher burden on the existing staff, which increases their burnout and decreases their productivity, and that increases cost. But what's really more concerning, I think, is that the employer reputation, really takes a hit. As I've mentioned, workers have so much access to wage benchmarks, and they talk on job boards, on social media,
Yes, they
they
do.
talk on community forums. A reputation for low wages or, limited advancement, that can linger and really make hiring even harder. Compensation is one of the biggest levers that employers have to stabilize their workforce. With the rising cost of living, even small increases in hourly pay can really help reduce turnover. And it was really, Ashley, all of these dynamics that we just talked about, that helped shape our 2025 salary guide. We really wanted to make sure we took a holistic view of what was occurring in the labor market. So, we took internal data from Adecco. We use market intelligence from Lightcast, along with some other economic indicators. And we created a tool that, is really data rich, but is practical. And what I'm really proud about is this salary guide is not just a list of numbers. It's really a strategic resource to help businesses benchmark their roles, help plan their workforce needs, and more importantly, make compensation decisions with confidence.
Ooh, I love that. Data rich but practical. So thank you so much, Nikki. You really captured the full picture. So we want to make this a little interactive. So let's hear from our audience before we dive a little bit deeper. So let's take an interactive poll. So we have our lovely little helpers behind the scenes. And you should see a poll go up in the chat. And our question is, what's your biggest challenge when it comes to pay strategy? So you should see different options, A through E. And the options range from staying competitive in the market, justifying wage increases internally, high turnover, understanding cost of living impacts, or others. So go through, answer our poll. We want to make this interactive. We want to make sure that we're touching on, what you're facing in the market, and ensuring that, you guys are getting true value out of our time here today. So let's see. All right, waiting on things to come through. Oh, okay. Seeing A, B, C, D, all of the above. All right, A. I love it. Okay, D a little bit. All right, so a little bit spread out, but staying competitive in the market, justifying wage increases internally. Okay, I think we're seeing a little bit more of that. And again, Nikki, thank you so much for everything that you shared. But now we're gonna switch up our speakers. And Andrew, let's turn to our actual tools that can help employers bring data to these decisions.
Yeah, thanks, Ashley. And thanks, Nikki. That was a really great overview of the current market. Sounds like it's very dynamic and a challenging environment for sure, but it's one that I think we can help our customers navigate. And a big part of how we help our customers make smarter decisions to address these challenges that we're seeing is through the tools that quantify the impact and benefit of adjusting rates, which is, as Nikki said, one of the top reasons why people move to a new job. So two of our most effective tools are the cost of turnover calculator and the cost of living calculator that we have. So let's start with the cost of turnover calculator, which is more of our financial based tool. And it helps our customers or clients predict how much turnover could decrease after a wage adjustment and what kind of savings that could create also. So we modeled this tool using real data from Adecco clients and looking at turnover rates before and after change in pay went into effect. So raising wages might seem like a higher cost up front, but when you factor in what it costs to backfill roles, things like recruiting, training, productivity lost, as Nikki mentioned, it often leads to a net savings. So this calculator that we have lets users plug in their own costs, and it estimates the potential savings that could result. So it's a really great resource for building a business case to support raising your pay rates.
That's a powerful way to reframe that conversation, Andrew. So many people see wages as a line item, but it really turns into an investment.
Yeah, exactly. And we really can't just stop at the financial benefit. As Nikki said, again, pay is no longer a preference. It's really a fundamental requirement for our workers to cover their basic living expenses. So we have to consider that human element when talking about compensation levels as well. So to that point, we built the cost of living calculator, and this tool highlights the real life challenges our workers could face. And it estimates the wage needed to meet those basic expenses in a given location. So we're talking about things like housing, food, childcare, transportation, all the basic living expenses that a worker might have. And it adjusts that based on the family size and the number of income earners as well. So in other words, it really helps our employers understand what it actually takes to live in a region. With inflation still high in many cities, the tool provides that level of context. And it helps our HR and operations leaders go beyond the national averages and really focus on the local needs that directly impact our worker population.
Andrew, you see my pen. I'm over here taking notes also. So I want to stop you real quick for what you shared. That's a critical insight. Understanding what it actually takes to live in a region, especially when we're talking about frontline and hourly workers where people are feeling the pinch the most, right? I think that's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is really coming directly from the workers that we're surveying. So as Nikki mentioned earlier, 52% of workers that we surveyed reported being stressed out about being able to cover their basic living expenses. So that really just shows how urgent of an issue it is. So again, using both of these tools that we have really creates a balanced view. So the cost of turnover calculator shows the financial case, the financial benefits of raising rates, and our cost of living calculator really helps humanize the conversation as well. So the dual perspective helps us drive decisions that are both sustainable and people-centric.
I love that dual perspective. And so I'll just add, shameless plug here, versions of both of these tools are actually available on our website. So we'll drop the link in the chat if you'd like to try them out for yourselves. Andrew, thank you so much. So now let's bring in Jimmy, also known as JC. So Jimmy, in your role, you work with some of our biggest, largest, most complex and strategic clients. Can you share how they are using these tools in the real world?
Absolutely. Thanks, Ashley. And thanks, Andrew. Always powerful to see how data turns into action. Ash, what I'm seeing with many of our national clients is a severe mindset shift. So pay strategy is no longer reactive. It's proactive and deeply tied to brand and workforce planning. So I'll share one recent example. A client was considering opening a new fulfillment center in a mid-sized metro area. And they came to us asking for a full picture, not just wages, but labor availability, commuting patterns, and what competitors were offering. So using Lightcast and our internal data, we provided a detailed snapshot of several things: median wages by job title, available candidate supply, local employer brand sentiment, including social media feedback, which we know is critical in today's age, and geographic talent sources, all the way down to the county level. Where are folks willing to commute from? And I'd say that level of visibility gave them the confidence to move forward. And more importantly, it helped them structure pay packages that were competitive and honestly, they were sustainable.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a smart approach, especially including the brand perception, right? We know that reputation is something our clients are asking about more and more. To Nikki's point earlier, there's so much more visibility, social media, et cetera, et cetera. So, no, I think that's great.
Yep, it is. I mean, a strong employer brand is a game changer. And a weak one, as we've seen, can derail hiring, even with good wages. I mean, we all know that candidates talk, right? So they share experiences online. And when you're paying below market or offering unclear expectations, it will show up in Glassdoor reviews, even Reddit threads, or even TikTok videos.
Yes, it will.
We all know the power of social media and how it can touch millions in a matter of seconds.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we encourage our clients to think about their total talent value prop, right? So competitive pay in the cornerstone, but it is the cornerstone, but so is, flexibility and scheduling, clear growth paths, and a safe and inclusive environment. So we're seeing a rise in equity focused compensation reviews across all geographies. So, companies that have multiple locations across the U.S., they want to ensure fairness in how they pay teams, even when, markets differ slightly.
Got it. And so, Jimmy, I know that a few of our national accounts have even used the salary guide to make year-end budget cases. Can you share a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I'd say many of our clients are using the salary guide as part of QBRs, talent strategy decks, and even investor presentations. So when they walk in with real data and tools like Andrew spoke about, cost to turnover calculator, it shifts the conversation from, do we have to raise wages to, what's the ROI if we actually do? So I think it's a game changer in aligning, finance, HR, and operations around a shared pay strategy.
Got it. That was fantastic, Jimmy. Thank you so much. And that's so much to think about. So we are running up on time. So we are going to ditch the second poll that we had, and we're going to jump right into your questions because we know that's why a lot of you are here today. So first question, let's see here. How often should companies revisit their pay rates? Andrew, I'm going to flip this one over to you.
Yeah, it's a great question. So we recommend reviewing pay rates at least annually, but in high turnover, fast moving industries like manufacturing, logistics, or even customer service, a biannual or quarterly review would be beneficial. So we know markets evolve quickly, and staying aligned with those local wage trends can really make or break your ability to hire and retain talent. So even small adjustments can improve your competitive position, especially when you use tools like the salary guide and cost of living calculator to anchor those decisions that you're making in data.
Got it. Thank you so much, Andrew. I think we can squeeze in one more. Are there regional markets that are especially competitive right now? Nikki, I think you would probably be best to answer that one.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely is the answer. And I think what we're seeing is probably the most competition in the fast growing metro areas, where population and business expansion are just outpacing the labor supply. So if you think of places like Dallas, Fort Worth, Atlanta, Phoenix, Nashville, these are markets where job postings are high, but the supply of workers, especially skilled workers, is really, really tight. So employers in these areas, often need to offer probably above average, wages just to stay competitive. And that's where using hyper local wage data from our salary guide, can really become important.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Nikki. So we are just about out of time, but before we go, I want to thank all of you so much for spending a part of your day with us. So here are 3 key takeaways. Number 1, first and foremost, pay rates matter. They're the top driver of hiring and retention, and they directly affect your bottom line. Number 2, data is your friend, right? We talked about the tools we have, our salary guide, turnover calculator, and cost of living calculator. They give you insights to act strategically, not emotionally. And last but not least, you don't have to do it alone, right? Adecco is here to help, whether it's understanding your market, crafting a competitive offer, or navigating these complex workforce shifts like we've shared with you all today. We are here to be your strategic partner. We had a lot of questions in the chat that we were not able to get to, but you will receive a follow-up email with today's link in the recording. You have access to the salary guide and our tools available. And if you'd like a deeper dive, or if you want to connect and actually, talk to one of our experts about the questions you had, just reach out. We would love to connect. And on behalf of Nikki, Andrew, Jimmy, and myself, thank you all so much. And we will see you again next time.
Thank you.